Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the 8th part of What If My Hero Academia Reacts to Hunter x Hunter. Credit goes to Makifinity. Chapter 9. Decision X by X Majority Rule? Gon's foot sprung off the floor with a blast of air, as he launched towards Netero headfirst. The elder grunted, eyes squinting as Gon's head impacted his stomach. Netero looked unperturbed, eyes wide as he stared down at Gon, who quickly landed on his feet and kept his arms rigid by his side. Again. The young boy shouted out, with a determined expression. He fired again at Netero, his teeth grit together, eyebrows furrowed. Netero's eyes softened for a moment, before he used his right hand to propel Gon forward as he leapt over him. Hey, we weren't really paying attention, but Gon really was being pretty stubborn here, Mirio said, smiling at Gon's determined look. If all else fails, bash your head really hard against it, Ciro joked, beginning to laugh before dying down slowly and paling at the dry glare Eraserhead was sending him. No problem, child. Gon flew straight into the wall behind, hitting his head with a loud sound. Netero gracefully landed on his feet before turning around. Gon sat up quickly, smiling. Netero made a sound, thrown off by the expression. You just used your right hand. Netero looked at his hand, surprised that Gon's words were true, and grunted in confirmation. Gon's smile stretched as wide as his face allowed, before he threw his fists in the air, whooping out, I did it. Quote. Netero had to so Gon wouldn't hurt himself, Uraraka muttered, remembering the old man's words. Todoroki frowned a bit, eyebrows twitching. How hard could his stomach be that he'd actually worry about Gon injuring himself? Single quote. Ah. Hagakure cooed, flailing around dramatically. Toga made an unimpressed sound. Kilu is cuter, she thought. Yahoo! He cried out, before falling flat, asleep before he hit the ground. A wide smile dawned his face, the mark from where he'd hit the wall a bright red. The title flashed, Decision X by X Majority Rule? As upbeat and bright music played. Decision? Are they going to be playing a choice game? Sato guessed. Tokiyami shrugged. Let's hope there's no trick questions, he grimaced, remembering the old woman and the two-choiced pop quiz. He doubted that the consequences for choosing wrong would be anything less than deadly. The sun shone clearly as it peeked over steep grassy hills, the airship appearing tiny over the expanse. Dawn breaks. As the airship's carrying Gon and his friends approaches its destination. The third phase of the Hunter exam is about to begin. You know, I just realized how much traveling they've done during this exam, Kaminari said, blinking owlishly. Shinso paused, before his eyebrows rose slightly. Where even are they now? Momo muttered, looking at the ground below the airship. Soft snores were heard as Gon, with his green jacket draped over him as best as it could lay on the ground asleep, the smile from before still hanging on his face. The snores halted as his eyes abruptly opened, wide and questioning. I apologize for the delay, Bean's voice came through the speakers. Gon catapulted to his feet, jumping straight into the air from where he laid down. The airship will soon arrive at its destination, Beans announced. All Might winced, feeling phantom pain in his neck at the sight of Gon sleeping on the floor. He was there the whole night. Mina exclaimed. Gon ran to the window, and jumped hanging onto the wall by his fingers and feet hunched, as he looked out of the window. Wow! Quote. Dobby frowned at Gon hanging off the wall. Something's wrong with that kid. The airship approached a tall concrete cylinder building that seemed worn with age, patchy grass at the top, with what seemed to be a smaller version of it perched on top, stretching high into the sky. Is that where the next test will be held? Gon wondered aloud. The airship had now landed, the applicants around it as small as ants from the eagle's eye point of view. That thing's huge, Midnight commented. What a strange location, Ribbit, Suyu said, taking it in. Is it like a tower on top of a tower? Question mark. What is that? Kirishima said inquisitively, puzzled. Where are we? A deep voice questioned, as the applicants came into better view, taking in the environment around them. Gon, Kahlua, Kurapika and Leorio formed a loose group, each looking off into a direction as they silently observed. There's nothing here, an applicant said. Ahem, their attention drew forward, where Beans stood, his hands politely positioned behind his back. Everyone, the third phase of the exam will begin here, at the top of Trick Tower. Trick Tower? An applicant asked. Way to be obvious, huh, Bakugo said dryly at the name. A few of the teachers and students could feel growing anxiousness at the possibilities of the next phase. To pass this phase, you must reach the tower's base alive, Beans informed them. The image panned out, showing the airship and the applicants on the flat top of a cylinder skyscraper, at the bottom, a few hints of grass and another building that it stood upon. The time limit is 72 hours, he informed them. Beans held up his hands. With that, the third phase will now begin. I wish you all luck. At his words, the crowd immediately stirred, looking around once more. A few gaped at the height of the tower. They have 3 days to reach the bottom. A generous time limit like that, Midoriya trailed off. The next phase will be a challenge for sure, Nedzu finished his thought. They had to reach it alive. That implies so many things, Jiru said, shivering slightly. Kahlua blinked and nodded once, looking unconcerned. A stilted laugh could be heard, as the image fuzzed and panned out to a TV, where they were being broadcasted. The lower half of a face appeared as they bit into a potato chip, chewing smugly. So it's finally my turn? A man with narrow beady eyes and round thin glasses appeared, chewing. Another was shown, the screen lighting his face, with thin brows, deep eye bags and a heavy-set bottom lip. They're being watched? By who? Kirishima said to himself. Sir Night Eye held a serious expression. Most likely by the next examiners, the sidekick said, eyeing the new characters. A third was shown, his arms crossed, bare-chested except for the sleeveless fur coat he wore. His hair stretched to his back, long jagged scars across his face. Crunching broke through the silence, as the man continued to snicker. Before them was an entire wall filled with screens that broadcasted different rooms, the largest screen in the center, recording the applicants that were at the top of Trick Tower. Creepy? No, not creepy at all, Uraraka mumbled under her breath skeptically. There's so many different spots, Ribbit. I wonder exactly how big the inside must be, Suyu said, her eyes scanning over the different recording monitors in the dark room. What is all of this? Tamaki murmured. Everyone, please do your best. Bean's voice encouraged through loudspeakers as the airship that had brought them there departed, leaving the applicants behind. Gon grabbed onto an edge, looking over with big eyes. He made a noise of awe as he looked at the ground that was far down below, wind whistling. The other three gathered behind him, standing to look over the edge. Should they be leaning that far over a ledge that has absolutely no type of wall or anything to prevent you from falling? Mina asked rhetorically. Are we supposed to climb down? Leorio asked, clutching his briefcase to his chest with both arms. That would be suicide, Kurapika replied, having his arms crossed as he looked downwards. A confident chuckle could be heard, and the quartet turned to look back. Maybe for an ordinary person, a voice said. A man appeared wearing an earth-colored wife beater, with fingerless gloves. He stood with his arms crossed, smiling slightly. I don't think they're supposed to climb down. The examiners are somewhere inside the tower waiting on them, Ojiro said, remembering the three strange men. They'd be spending the next 3 days hanging on the side of the tower without any rest. It's absolutely impractical, Aizawa included. The scene switched over to hands gripping onto cracks and ledges, grunts of effort heard. But an expert rock climber like me can handle this, no problem, he said, as he began to descend down the tower. Wow, Kahlua said bluntly, eyes betraying his disinterest. He's going down pretty fast, Gon said, watching the man. Quite a bold move to attempt at a place called Trick Tower. Who knows what traps he might find, Compress hummed to himself. Ooh, do you think it's like pressing a button by accident, and he gets gutted out? It would be so pretty, Toga sighed to herself, while twice nodded in agreement. I hope it's nothing like that, Present Mike thought in growing concern for the applicant. The man laughed again, as he continued to climb down the tower. Looks like I'll be the first one to pass the third phase, he stated. A soft whoosh was heard and the man stopped, letting out a questioning hum. The sound grew closer and he began to look around, wondering. Kahlua, Gon, Kurapika, and Leorio, who were still on top of the tower, looked up as well, searching for the source. The man slowly turned his head to the left, sweat gathering near his temple. He watched, tense, as the sound grew louder and louder. Something's coming. I have a few ideas and they're not so pretty, Gran Torino said, sighing. Midoriya's breath hitched. Brows knit close as he hoped for the man to climb back up to safety before it was too late. Around the corner came large red creatures, with closed eyes and sharp jagged teeth, flying in the air, despite their numerous legs. Stop! Stay away! The man cried out, as the creatures flew by him, screeching loudly. He pressed closely to the wall in an effort to not be thrown down. A few of the students reared back in their seats, from shock and disgust. What in the world? Iida gasped at the unsightly creatures. Oh ew! Sato exclaimed. Kaminari appeared faint, eyes wide as he stared in fear and confusion. The quartet watched from above with varying reactions, to Leorio's queasy expression, to Kahlua's disappointed look. No. No, don't. The man cried out, as one of the creatures, with an abnormally large human-like nose, pointed teeth and discolored tongue swooped in vertically, snagging him into its jaws. They flew straight upwards, passing the four up top whose heads tilted up to watch as the creatures flew away. Help! The man's voice cried out distantly, as they flew farther and farther away. What type of world are they living in? First the Kurikos, then the Swindler's Swamp, the Spider Eagles and, oh I'm gonna be sick. Kaminari trailed off, tinging green as he lurched at the thought, hands clapping over his mouth. Abnormally large creatures for the world they live in, reminiscent of prehistoric Earth that was discovered and documented in the pre-Quark era, Nedzu thought, his ears flicking. Oh cool, a free ride. Idiots given M a free meal, too, twice contradicted himself. Gee, guess we can't just climb down the wall, Leorio said, frozen where he stood along with the others who watched, stunned. Yeah, Kurapika offhandedly agreed, still staring into the sky. The wind whistling could be heard, as the tower was shown from ground up once more, with several of the winged creatures hanging around it. Jaretta, the dark-skinned huntsman, was shown using his staff to tap along the floor as he walked. The three brothers, Amori, and Umori were in a diagonal line a few feet apart as they all seemed to be searching. It has to be trapdoors. They can't climb down, nor is there anything else up there with them, Iida proposed. Todoroki nodded in agreement. The question is where and how to trigger them open, All Might muttered. Kurapika stepped forward, looking around as Leorio trailed behind him, watching the blonde carefully. What's going on? Leorio asked, realizing Kurapika had noticed something. There are fewer people around now, Kurapika told him. What? Leorio said, a bit startled as he looked around. The applicants were sparse and spread thin on the top of the tower, unlike the crowd from earlier. I count 23 in all, which suggests almost half of the applicants have found a way in, Kurapika explained. Whoa! How'd they not even catch a glimpse of someone literally disappearing in thin air? Nijire questioned. Tamaki shyly shrugged at her perturbed expression. Situational awareness is certainly important, Vlad King said, thinking about the difficulties they would have saved themselves by simply observing the crowd of applicants for the first ones who made it in. No way. When did they do that? Leorio said, moving his briefcase from over his shoulder. That means there must be some kind of hidden door that leads below, Kurapika said, crossing his arms. Kurapika. Leorio. Quote. The two of them turned their heads to where Gon and Kahlua stood, the former waving them over. What is it, Gon? Kurapika asked, as they briefly walked over to the pair. Look, I found a hidden door, Gon said, kneeling to the ground. Sweet. Kirishima said, a smile slipping on his face. He pushed slightly and the slab of floor began to give out. Leorio made a shocked noise as Gon let it go and the ground returned to normal. I see. So we descend by flipping the slabs, Kurapika realized, placing a hand under his chin. Okay. Great job, Gon. Leorio cheered, putting a hand on the younger's back. Let's head down. But I'm unsure, Gon began. What are you unsure about? Leorio asked. There are also hidden doors here, he pointed forwards. There, he pointed again. Over there, and over there as well. Is that a bad thing? Mina said out loud, turning to look at the others. Izuku simply shrugged. There's really not much to go off of. They simply told them the time limit and to get to the base. It's possible it could be since it's called Trick Tower, but, the freckled boy explained. All the tiles look the exact same. How are you even supposed to know? Ciro said, scratching the back of his neck. That many? Leorio remarked. 5 hidden doors, located in the same area. It sounds suspicious to me, Kurapika said, hand on chin once more. Some could be traps. And it looks like each door can only be used once, Kahlua tacked on. Seriously? Leorio said. It flashed back to Gon and Kahlua watching an applicant seated on the ground, before the ground beneath him gave in, flipping him inside. We tried opening a door someone else used. They ran over to where the applicant was seated, and Gon knocked his hand against the slab, only to find it solid and unmovable. But it wouldn't budge. If doors can't be reused, doesn't that mean not everyone might find one? Ochako said with a concerned look. There may be that possibility. There's only a limited amount to shed off some applicants, Nedzu replied. Ah, come on, it'll be so unfair for there to be both a limit and some doors to be fakes too. Kaminari protested. Zero sighed and shrugged slightly at his words. Don't think they care much about fair, bro. Judging by the door's size, seems only one person can go through at a time, Kurapika muttered. Kahlua spoke up. In other words, only one person can use each door. We'll have to split up, he said, holding up a finger. Gon and I decided that we're each going to choose a door, Kahlua said, a content look on his face. No hard feelings if one of us springs a trap. Gon added. What are you gonna do? Leorio, Kurapika? Gon questioned, looking back and forth at the two. Risky, but there's nothing much they can do about it, Gran Torino said. Their luck will truly be tested here, Sir Night-Eye stated. Doesn't this mean that they're going separate ways then? Ribbit, Suyu commented. I can live with that. Luck is part of the game, Leorio agreed. I have no objections, Kurapika voiced, stepping forward. Then that settles it. Gon and Leorio's feet were shown planting themselves directly onto a slab, the four of them standing a few feet apart, forming an oddly shaped square. Let's go, on the count of 3, Leorio announced. I guess this is goodbye for now, Gon said to them. Let's meet again, at the base of the tower, Kurapika confidently said. Let's go, Kahlua urged, expression bright with his skateboard tucked under his arm. 1. He began, looking down at the floor. They're splitting up, Izuku said quietly. They've been side by side practically the entire exam, and if we're not counting Kahlua, since the preliminaries, Tokiyami said. Isolating the applicants, to test their individual skills, Recovery Girl presumed. 2. Gon continued excitedly, bending down closer to the ground. 3. The four shouted simultaneously, jumping onto the slab positioned in front of them at the same time. In less than a second, the stone flipped over, dropping them inside, before it returned to normal. The wind rushed, the steep drop from the top of the tower to the inside shone. Gon landed on one knee, Kahlua gracefully landed on both feet, Kurapika doing the same, while Leorio fell face first into the ground with a grunt. How many feet was that? Present Mike said, caught off guard by the steepness. Of course he falls face first. Mineta laughed. Bakugo side-eyed him before sneering. Don't pretend as if you wouldn't be a purple shit smear on the ground, the blonde said, earning a high-pitched squeal from Mineta. The man coughed slightly, before removing his face from the ground, tinged red all over. OWW. He groaned out. Leorio's face blanked for a moment as he looked up, surprised. Huh? Kurapika, Gon, and Kahlua all said at once, realizing they were all in the same room. Silence echoed for a moment, before Leorio said, huh? What? Quote. Kahlua and Gon turned to each other, eyes wide before they broke out into sheepish wide grins. That was a brief farewell, Kurapika said, standing up completely. Leorio rose from his position on the ground, sitting. Oh, so all the doors led to the same room, the man said exasperatedly. Compress let out a chuckle, shaking his head slightly at the situation. Shigaraki grumbled before muttering, how convenient for them. Yay. They don't get split up. Hagakure cheered loudly. Momo let out a tiny exhale, feeling a small sense of relief that the group of budding friends would get to see another phase while together. Gon's footsteps echoed as he walked past the two, who trailed behind him. The boy walked straight towards a stand with a sign on the wall above it. The 5 who drop into this chamber must find their way down together by majority rule, is what it says. Gon read aloud at the sign marked with foreign letters. The 5 of us? Leorio questioned. Gon looked down at the stand, where there were 5 wristbands. Look, there are 5 wrist timers, Gon pointed out, picking one up. The others stepped closer, Kahlua the first to grab another of the wristbands. There's only 4 of them, Jiru trailed off. Gon found 5 doors in the same area, Iida realized. Which means they need a 5th, Ojiro finished for him. A timer ticking down from 71 hours and 19 minutes was shown on the wristband. There's an O and an X button, Kahlua said. Could it be that we won't be able to leave this room until another person drops in? Kurapika said, clicking on the wrist timer before looking up at the others. The sound of a speaker clicking on startles them, before a voice said, that is correct. The 4 turned to the upper right wall of the room where a speaker was positioned. Who's that? Exclamation mark. Leorio shouted. My name is Lippo. I am the warden here, as well as the examiner for the 3rd phase, the voice introduced itself. Warden? Kurapika asked. Seriously? Sato retorted, frowning at the requirement. Midnight eyed the time on the wristbands before speaking. It's a big advantage for them to have reminders of the time limit, she said appreciatively. Warden? Aizawa parroted after the screen, squinting suspiciously. The group of 3 from previously were shown again, this time watching the group through the big screen. There are multiple routes through this tower. You have chosen the path of majority rules, Lippo, the man with the thin-framed glasses and purple mohawk, spoke. Cooperation will be key if you wish to clear this phase of the exam, he said, fiddling with a potato chip in one hand. One person's selfishness can derail an entire group. And you can't start until you have 5 members, Lippo's voice informed the quartet, as they listened carefully. So there's different types of challenges depending on what door, meaning you could end up in a group or alone, Jiru said. Their luck really won out, All Might spoke attentively. It may be starting to run short, Sir Night Eye said grimly, at the fact that the 4 needed a 5th in order to proceed. I really hope this isn't some type of foreshadowing, Mirio winced, listening to the examiner's warning. Best of luck, gentlemen. The speaker fizzled out before clicking off. Leorio let out a short exhale, as they all relaxed from the defensive positions they took. We can't move on until someone else arrives? Leorio said, holding out his hands. What do we do? Quote. They turned back to the stand, where the last wristband remained. We have to wait, I guess, Kurapika stated, before his gaze trailed upwards. The rest of them looked up to the ceiling as well, filled with slabs. Maybe it won't be too long. Eventually, Ochako murmured. Do you think if they made noise someone up there would hear them and find the trapdoor? Momo asked. Tokiyami shook his head discouragingly. I think they're too far down. And even so, I can't think of many who wouldn't steer clear. A group of screaming people doesn't paint a pretty picture in an exam that's been deadly so far. The chair under Lippo creaked slightly as he turned around, a smug grin on his face. He held up 2 fingers to his mouth before loudly whistling. A door slid open quickly, revealing the bare feet of several people, all dressed in dark robes and pants, with their hands shackled to their front. The sound of their feet could be heard as they walked forward, hands bound. A crowd of them stood, faces obscured by a heavy hood. "Did you call for us, Warden?" one asked, voice deep and baritone. "What?" Iida murmured, confused. "Warden, it's no coincidence," Aizawa thought as his frown deepened. "Fucking creepy. Oh look, they must be Jehovah's Witnesses." Twice chirped. "The plot thickens," Toga giggled. "The test begins now," Lippo said to them in his seat, the other 2 standing close by his side. "Take your assigned positions," Lippo commanded, holding out an arm, pointing at them with a potato chip. "Okay," they spoke in unison. Tamaki felt a heavy weight on his chest. It definitely won't be easy, he thought, hoping the group would be ready. Leorio's hands were clasped, as he impatiently tapped his finger. The timer on his wrist read 69 hours and 22 minutes. His foot tapped on the ground. Where he sat. Gon was circling the room on Kilua's skateboard, while Kilua stood in a corner, casting out Gon's fishing rod. Kurapika sat a foot away from Leorio. "Oh, come on." Leorio angrily yelled, causing Gon to stop in his tracks and look over. "It's been 2 hours, what if the others all took different routes?" Leorio said, standing up to look at the other 3. "Hate to say it, old man's got a point. What idiot would still be up there?" Bakugo said. Nedzu frowned, thinking about the possibility. "Someone has to come," Kirishima hesitantly, leaving out the "or else." He agitatedly punched his fist into his hand. Only a fool would still be at the top of the tower. Leorio argued. "Calm down, Leorio," Kurapika said coolly as Kilua watched with lazy eyes, before yawning loudly. "Complaining won't help," Kurapika told him. "But what if no one shows up before we reach our time limit?" Leorio persisted, pointing at the timer on his wrist. Faint but steady knocking could be heard and Gon looked up. "Hey!" Leorio called out angrily. A few perked up at the sound. "Guess they can hear them down there." "Or at least Leorio," Shinso said, which Kaminari snorted at. "But who could it be? After being up there for 2 hours, they probably won't be of much help," Todoroki thought. "I can't just sit here and," Leorio continued before getting shushed by Kurapika. "Quiet," the blonde said urgently. "Huh?" Leorio barked. Kurapika pointed upwards. "That sound," Kurapika said, as the sound of the knocking increased. Leorio made a choked noise, before he looked up, eyes wide. 2 firm knocks rang loudly, before one of the slabs on the ceiling began to cave, small bits of rock and dirt falling to the ground. Leorio needs to work on being more aware of his surroundings, Midnight lightly chided. Everyone sat in a tense silence as they waited for the reveal of the 5th person. The 4 gathered around it, all looking up in wonder. Debris continued to fall from the ceiling as the piece of slab shifted. It gave in and a flash of only blue could be seen as a person dropped in quickly. They landed with a thud. The 4 watched, expressions curious, as the figure with a blue vest slowly began to rise from the ground, with a heavy groan, revealing none other than Tonpa. "No," Mina said, before groaning dramatically. "Great, out of all the extras they could have ended up with," Bakugo sniffed, a disgusted look on his face. Izuku's lips pressed together firmly as he sat back further in his seat with a slightly disappointed look. "They can work this out, somehow," Mirio tried to encourage. The man rubbed the back of his neck. "Good grief," he sighed. "Mr. Tonpa," Gon said, face blank, compared to Killua, Kurapika, and Leorio. "Oh man," Killua said, with a deadpan expression. "It's the old man," Leorio commented, with the same look. Kurapika watched as well with an oh-so-done look. "Give them some credit, at least they're realizing the guy's full of nothing but hot air," Spinner commented at the not-so-joyful expressions on the four's faces. Tonpa clicked the last wrist timer around his hand, saying, "All right." Immediately a loud rumbling could be heard, as the room shook slightly. They all looked up to see a part of the wall slide upwards, revealing a door with a sign posted up on it. "I see," Kurapika said, as they approached it. "So the door appears once 5 people arrive and put on the timers. To open this door, select O to open, X to not open," Gon read. An O and an X were underneath the words. "Forcing us to use the majority rule already?" "The answer should be obvious," Leorio said, twisting his wrist to press on the timer, as well as the other 4. A sound was heard, as the O and X displayed counts, 4 and 1 respectively. "What?" Leorio shouted. The door rumbled open, as Leorio continued. "Who pushed the X button?" The others looked around at each other. Exasperated sighs and groans could be heard. "Not too hard to guess who," Nijire said unimpressed. "He's doing it to merely antagonize them and set them back. Getting upset would only give him what he wants," Aizawa voiced. "He's so frustrating to deal with," Ochako said. "Kid, welcome to adulthood. Sometimes you're forced to work with subpar people, with even worse skills," Gran Torino grumbled. Tonpa laughed nervously, rubbing his hand behind his neck. "Sorry, that was me. I pressed the wrong button by mistake," he admitted. Leorio grabbed him by the front of his shirt, yanking him forward. "Stop messing around, old man." Leorio gritted out, a murderous smile on his face. "Are ya blind?" Quote. Tonpa looked frightened for a moment, before falling, side-eyeing Leorio nastily. "Like I said, it was an accident," he insisted. "How can you accidentally press the wrong button?" Exclamation mark. Leorio roared out. "And there he goes, giving him exactly what he wants," Vlad King exhaled. Leorio's temper along with Tonpa's eagerness to get under their skin, a recipe for a fine disaster, Nedzu said, clicking his tongue. "They don't have time for this," Suyu mentioned. "It doesn't matter," Gon stepped in, holding up a hand. The door opened. Leorio turned to him. "No, it does matter." Leorio turned back to look at Tonpa, who he still held in his hand. "This guy deliberately pressed the X button." Leorio protested. "Let's go." "We don't have time to bicker," Kurapika said curtly. "That's right, even if he keeps pressing the wrong one, the rest of us just need to press the right one," Killua spoke up, while following Kurapika through the door. Gon followed them as well, and Leorio looked for a moment, turning back to Tonpa with a pissed expression. The shorter man had a shit-eating grin on his face as Leorio let him go. "Fine," Leorio let out, a tick mark appearing on his temple. It is majority rule, as long as the four of them work together, they don't have to worry about Tonpa's schemes, Momo confidently stated. I have to admit, the guy really does know how to get under people's skin. Makes me want to beat the living shit out of him, Magna huffed. If anyone tried to get under your skin, big sis, I'd get under theirs first. Toga smiled brightly. Several in the theater shivered at the very real implications of that. Tonpa chuckled, before stepping forward confidently. Okay, let's go. He said animatedly, walking through the door. A beyond angry look appeared on Leorio's face as he clenched his fist and grinded down on his teeth. Damn, Leorio hissed out in displeasure, following them. Bakugo sucked his teeth loudly, glaring at Tonpa, fingers itching. Seriously, Leorio said as they arrived in front of a wall, with another sign posted. Another question right after the first door? Quote. Which way do you want to go? O for right, X for left, gone red. They all turned to look at the right, where bars blocked the route, beyond that a dim light leading down a hallway. Right, Leorio mumbled. The camera switched over quickly to the left, looking as identical as the right path. Or left, Leorio said again. Without another word, they all turned to their wristbands, clicking. The score showed, with O leading 3 and X with 2. They both look identical, Tamaki said. Another toss-up guess, Nijire shrugged. Huh? Exclamation mark. Leorio cried out. Why would you choose to go right? Leorio said defensively. Normally, you should go left in situations like this. Leorio argued. That is true. Research has indicated that people who are lost or stuck at forks unconsciously tend to go left, Kurapika responded. I've heard that before too, Kahlua agreed, holding up a finger. Wait. Then the numbers don't add up. Leorio said, before pointing at Kurapika. Which button did you press? Quote. Well, they didn't say they chose left, they said what research knows, Zero specified. In this case it would be the safer option to choose right. There's more chance it could be less difficult if majority people would choose to go left, Izuku said. Right, the Kurta said simply, before walking past him to go right. Right, Kahlua said as well, following close after Kurapika. Why you guys, Leorio said shakily as he watched them walk past. That's why they chose to go right, to outwit the examiner, Tonpa told him with a slight smile. If the examiner knows that people tend to go left, the left path will be more difficult, Tonpa continued, wagging a finger at Leorio with an all-knowing look. He can't tone down the asshole for a second, can he? Midnight said under her breath. Leorio gritted his teeth again, muffled angry noises escaping him as he watched the older man walk away. Gon blinked, before turning to look at Leorio, wide-eyed. Fine, so we're just simple-minded. Leorio huffed out angrily, before marching forward. We? Gon said, as he followed after them. The group of them walked down the short hallway, making a left turn. They continued to walk, the sound of their footsteps the only noise heard. Aoyama laughed shortly at Gon's words. Tonpa was definitely the second person to vote left, Iida said, shaking his head in disbelief at the audacity of the man. Kurapika and Kahlua, who were at the head of the group, stopped. The five of them stood in an open area out of the dimly lit hallway, into a bright space, but the path ahead of them ended abruptly. Where are we? Leorio asked nervously. They stood in a large arena-like area. Several hundreds of feet ahead of them, without any bridges, was a platform, all four corners having large torches. On the other side, was an exit looking identical to where they had entered from. "Holy fudge, that's a far drop," Kaminari sang shakily, eyeing the edge. The real phase begins, all for one smirked slightly. "It looks a lot like the stage where the tournament took place for the sports festival," Shinso noted. "Look over there," Kahlua said, drawing the group's attention to the other side. On the other side, stood four figures, a fifth seated at the back. They were all clothed in the same robes from before. "The applicants have arrived," a male voice spoke aloud from the figures. "Remove my handcuffs." The thick heavy cuffs on the first figure's wrists separated before falling apart with a thud. "I think I know where this is headed," All Might said, a serious expression on his face. "Who are they?" Mina said, just above a whisper. "All right," he groaned, rubbing his wrists. He grabbed at the robe covering his head, before flipping it off. The group watched intently, as he stepped over the fallen robe with bare feet. "I'm finally free," the man said, stepping into the light, revealing a well-muscled figure, jaw sturdy with scars upon his scalp. "Gone," Kahlua and Kurapika observed, their faces unreadable. Tonpa looked on with a tense and cautious look. Leorio's face was scrunched up with unease. They're going to fight against them, Kirishima realized. Finally, this shit was getting soft, Dabi thought to himself. Fighting? Hell yeah, Bakugo said, with a vicious grin. Tilde. The man's face appeared again, watching them carefully but confidently. Leorio swallowed hard, exhaling unsteadily. "Allow men to explain, gentlemen," Lippo's voice came through, startling them as they looked upward searching for the source. "Before you are a few of Trick Tower's prisoners," Lippo said. "Prisoners?" Kurapika mumbled, as he looked back at the man. "Prisoners?" Exclamation mark. The class exclaimed at once. "Oh dear," Nedzu mumbled, ears flicking. "He's a warden. Or more specifically, their warden. My best guess is they're going to be preventing them from getting to the base of the tower by any means," Aizawa grimaced. "The Hunter Exam Committee has officially hired them as examiners," Lippo continued, the man on the other side continuing to stare them down. The other prisoners remained in the back, completely masked. "You will be fighting against the 5 of them. The fights will be one-on-one," Lippo informed. Leorio put down his suitcase. "Each person may only fight once." Lippo appeared, eyes peering into the screen narrowed and devious. "You can fight in any way you like. There will be no draws. A win is declared when the opponent admits defeat," Lippo said, the platform appearing front and center on the large screen. "Pitting them against actual criminals," All Might said, shaking his head at the risk of it. Recovery Girl's face scrunched tight as she fumed at Lippo's words. Several of the hero students' eyes widened. "They'll have to fight convicts?" Question mark. Sato said, incredulous. "Talk about hardcore," Dabi said, expression unreadable. "Decide for yourselves which order you will go in," the prisoner finally spoke up across the space. "Win the majority of the matches, in other words, if you secure 3 wins, you may pass. The rules are simple." Leorio scoffed, putting his hands on his hips. "Majority rule again?" he said under his breath. "Well, I prefer straightforward rules," Kahlua said. At least 3 of them will have to fight against the prisoners, Suyu croaked. Gon and Killua can't fight, Momo said, shaking her head. They're just kids. Quote. Bakugo Tsked at her exclaimed, wanting to remind her that the exam hadn't exactly expressed any concern for the applicants who had died throughout the first 2 phases. Lippo appeared again, smirking a bit nastier. However, the actual fights will not be quite so simple. The prisoner appeared on the screen, standing tall and proud. The prisoners' sentences will be reduced by 1 year for every hour they delay the applicants here, Lippo announced as the masked prisoners appeared on the screen. The screen he watched through switched over to the group once more, all watching the revealed prisoner carefully. So, their goal is also to buy time. Aizawa's eyes hardened. He's trying to make sure this will be long and painful, the pro-hero thought. What? Even if it's for the hunter's exam, why the hell would they give prisoners an opportunity like that to get away with their crimes? Iida said defiantly. An incentive, to make sure that the prisoners are thoroughly motivated to keep the applicants from moving any further, Sir Night-Eye explained. I understand, Kurapika said. And we must reach the goal within 72 hours, Kurapika said, looking at his wrist timer that now read 69 hours and 12 minutes. So time will be critical during these fights, Kurapika finished, as Gon looked at him. Gon turned back to look across to the other side. The platform stood dauntingly in the center, the tension increasing. Okay, I'm up first, the prisoner called out. The screen read, Ben. 199-year sentence, robbery and murder. The atmosphere grew frigid, as many tensed visibly in their seats at the description. I don't need to imagine the amount of robberies and murders under his belt to earn him a sentence that high, Mirio thought, frowning. This is insane, Shinso mumbled to himself, worried for the group. Choose your combatant. He said to them. What should we do? He said that we could fight with any method. Killua turned his head slightly to talk to the others. So that means anything goes. We don't know what they'll try and pull, Leorio said, a sweat bead lining his face as he watched on high alert. There's too much at stake without knowing what they have up their sleeves. Given that, I shall. Kurapika began with a determined look before getting cut off. No, I'll go. Tonpa interrupted him, walking forward. Both Gon and Kurapika watched him, taken back. Mr. Tonpa. Gon said dubiously, as the man stood in front with a relaxed grin. Huh? Question mark. Exclamation mark. Midnight loudly exclaimed. Endeavor simply quirked an unimpressed brow. Shigaraki let out a loud scoff, his lips pulled back in a disgusted sneer. Blondie needs to get his ass moving. I'm not buying shit this extra says, Bakugo said bluntly. I'll be the guinea pig, so we can discover what they're up to. Consider this an apology for before, he said to them. Hey, are you serious? Leorio spoke up. Yeah. Besides, you guys don't actually trust me, right? Tonpa said, pointing a thumb at himself. Do you really want me to be the tiebreaker, when the score's at 2-2? He reasoned as they watched him with doubtful and befuddled looks. You have a point, Leorio hesitantly stated. Then it's settled. Tonpa finished with a cocky look on his face. Tonpa, Leorio trailed off a bit odd. Apology? Sounds fake, Jiru snorted. He's right about not leaving it up to him to break a tie if it leads to that, but it makes me unsteady that he's going to be their first gamble, Tamaki said quietly. Nijire nodded seriously. And if anything, the first win or loss tends to set the mood for a game or match. If this guy loses, he's only going to be adding on the pressure, she said. That might be what he's playing at. I doubt he's had such a sudden change of heart over the last 10 or so hours, President Mike said, remembering the desperate attempts Tonpa made on the airship to get Leorio and Kurapika sleep-deprived. Bendot huffed, smirking. The ground underneath the group trembled as a piece of it began to extend straight outward, headed for the platform. On the prisoners' side, the same bridge extended, reaching towards the platform. Tonpa took off his satchel, letting it fall to the ground. The bridge is connected solidly with the platform, making a loud sound. Bendot began to cross his way over with long strides. Tonpa walked forward as well, crossing over on the bridge. That was a surprise, Leorio stuttered. I didn't expect Tonpa to volunteer. God, I hope they're not seriously buying it. Kaminari groaned. Tonpa doesn't come off as the bravest, so his attitude flip has probably shocked them, Izuku responded. It's okay to call him a coward, Deku, Bakugo said, rolling his eyes. The green-haired boy squeaked before waving his hands and spluttering. That's not what I was trying to say. I wouldn't call anyone that. He said, his voice pitching and cracking. In the back, Toga giggled thinking to herself, so cute. Single quote. He even called himself a guinea pig, Kurapika said. Will Mr. Tonpa be okay? Gon questioned. The two arrived on the platform, standing on opposing sides. All right. Let's determine the method of combat. I propose a deathmatch, Bendot said confidently. Tonpa floundered for a moment, expression serious. A deathmatch? Gon reiterated, as the four looked in slight alarm. They fight until one of them dies? Leorio replied. No, don't let him provoke you. Kurapika urged, as he looked at the two, Bendot with an air of pridefulness. Well? Bendot said lowly, both of his hands on his hips. Shigaraki shifted slightly, his hazy red eyes pinned to the screen with newfound interest. He doesn't have to accept it, the examiner didn't say the method of fighting was left up to the prisoners, he can change it. All Might said, his face stone determined. A few of the students' faces paled. Please, no more people have to die, even someone as horrible as Tonpa. Ochako thought, biting her lip. Tonpa's brows were furrowed, lips set firmly as he looked ahead strongly. Very well, I accept your challenge. The older man said, bringing his fists up before baring them in a defensive position. Huh? The group said at once, Gon, Kurapika and Leorio looking, amazed by Tonpa's acceptance. Kahlua watched intently, his expression betraying nothing. I commend you for your courage. Bendot said, before he bent at the knees, sliding into a fighting position. The both of them were still, crouched as they observed the other, the air thick with pressure. Why the hell would he do that? Exclamation mark. That idiot knows that there's no way to back out of a death match, right? It's to the death. Bakugo shouted, voice straining. Is Tonpa going to actually fight? Question mark. Was he serious about apologizing? Izuku considered, confused as to where this was headed. Tonpa's face remained firm, his fists balled up to his chest as flames blazed to life behind him, creating a strong air of resolve. Bendot's face sported a challenging smile, flames surrounding his body as he steeled himself, full of force and wit. The four watched on, the air reddened and heavy with pressure. Tonpa growled, his hands slowly maneuvering in the air, no longer in fists but held before him, ready to strike out. Tonpa, Leorio stuttered, watching on high alert. Were we underestimating him? He did pass through the first and second phases after all, Vald King said hesitantly. The audience was quiet, confused about Tonpa's actual motives. Let the fight begin. Bendot growled, his fingers curled and muscles flexed, before he sprung from his position soaring in the air straight towards Tonpa. The prisoner flew in, his hands clenching tight as he reared back his right arm, his left forearm held defensively before him. Tonpa crouched lower, his arms reared, hands seemingly ready to strike. Everyone was tense, their eyes glued in front of them. Bendot lunged with his right arm, teeth bared menacingly as he closed in. Tonpa yelled out, his arms extending high above his head. Breaths were held as the heroes and villains alike anticipated Tonpa's first move to counter Bendot. Aerie squirmed in her seat, bringing her hands to cover over her eyes, but allowing enough space so that she could peek through. I give. He shouted, bowed all the way down, head pressed to the floor, as Bendot hung suspended in the air. Huh? Kahlua said, as the quartet watched with googly eyes, expressions frozen. What? Leorio said quietly, head tilted with his eyes squinted. Bendot landed on his feet, crouched before standing up, over Tonpa who remained bowed to the floor. Someone choked, the sound ringing out in the eerie silence that differed from the anxiety-riddled air just moments ago. Sir Night Eyes silently dragged a hand across his face, looking worn and tired as if he had spent 7 days consecutively fighting all for one himself. Toga, who had her hands in the air, getting ready to cheer loudly at the start of the deadly fight, was now frozen in time. Her eager smile stuck in place as her eye twitched with a frenzy look. Did he just say he gives up? Gon asked, unbelieving. To his right, Kurapika and Leorio stood with awkward frozen smiles. Kahlua remained impassive. Maybe he meant, give me a sec. Leorio said, trying to make sense of what happened. What did you just say? Bendot asked. Tonpa looked up, a crooked and anxious smile on his sweaty face. You win if I admit defeat, right? The man confirmed, holding out a hand. I give up, he reiterated, bowing his head on the floor once more. I lose. Quote. Compress gently laughed, amused. Cowardice knows no bounds, he thought, not particularly bothered by the man's compliance. He's not wrong, the examiner did say that it's a win when the opponent admits defeat, Ciro said quietly, his head shaking back and forth, disbelieving. Aizawa let out a deep sigh, staring dryly at the screen. A nap is sorely needed, he thought to himself, longing for his yellow sleeping bag. He let out a chuckle, looking up at Bendot nervously. Leorio's face was scrunched, veins popping throughout his temple, an eye twitching. Wah, 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 he angrily stuttered, watching Tonpa. Bendot's shoulders shook as he laughed, with his hands on his hips. He placed a hand on his head as he continued to laugh even harder, Tonpa watching him anxiously. Fine. I win this round, Bendot said, standing tall. If he ever loses his job as a kiss-ass, he can definitely sign up for being a top-list actor. Bakugo gritted out with a smile that had too many teeth to be genuine, eyes blazing with anger. Preach it, kid, he's a real fine actor. Puffed up worse than a puffer fish. Like he was real noble only to screw them over, Gran Torino said gruffly, his arms crossed. Well, if anything, there won't be any more questions about his real character, Nedzu nonchalantly stated. A point board above the prisoner's side dinged as it changed from 0 to 1. If we win 2 more rounds, you lose. You won't be able to advance or turn back. You'll be here until the 72 hours are up, Bendot announced to them. Should that come to pass, our sentences will be reduced by 72 years, the prisoner finished, laughing as he turned away, walking back across the bridge. Kirishima's fists clenched at the prisoner's taunt, the laugh echoing in his ears. All of this sucks. They have to fight against prisoners and they're already losing. What are they going to do now? Hagakure said, her voice upset and discouraged. They can't and won't give up. Tonpa's loss isn't the ultimate loss for their group. They'll keep going despite the odds against them, All Might said with a strong voice. His words brought comfort to the students who were beginning to feel doubtful. Man, that was a disgrace, Tonpa whined slightly, a shaky smile on his face as he joined the others. He looked a lot stronger up close, he said, a hand behind his head as he turned back to look at the platform. You bastard! Leorio proclaimed, yanking Tonpa by the front of his shirt. The others stepped back slightly, shocked by the outburst. You just confirmed all my suspicions. You're just a piece of trash, out to sabotage others. Leorio sneered. You're correct, Tonpa confirmed, a skeevy look on his face. Didn't think that would be important to mention like 3 episodes ago, huh, Mina said sarcastically. Iida was dismayed, wondering how Tonpa could be utterly uncaring of his low reputation. Pathetically spineless and weak in both mind and body. There aren't any differences to make him anything less than a worm, Stain spoke, his voice grating and carrying a bit of threat. That's what I do every year. And I plan to continue to do so, Tonpa revealed. Leorio's face twitched, confused. WH what? Quote. I'm not taking the hunter exam to pass, Tonpa continued, as Gon and Kahlua listened in. I'm only in it for the thrill. Kurapika watched Tonpa intently. The thrill? Leorio quizzed. That's right. A flashback was shown of Nicholas's laptop crashing to the ground, the boy dragging on his feet in the first phase. The hunter exam is the testing ground that crushes young people and their dreams. Nicholas collapsed to the ground, eyes rolled back with drool and snot, hands on his head as he was left behind. He likes seeing people get their hopes destroyed, Mirio said. He even paid those guys to bring down that boy, Midnight remembered. People like him make me sick, Kirishima thought, upset. Another flashback showed the gate at the top of the stairs in Phase 1, closing as an unfortunate applicant desperately tried to stumble their way there, only to get shut out. It gives me such pleasure to see the faces of those whose dreams are destroyed. More flashbacks appeared, of the swindler's swamp, the applicants dropping dead from the toxic claymore mushroom that pumped out yellow gas, an applicant getting reared by the large aggressive pigs of the second phase. More applicants fell to their death after miscalculating the jump during the retake of the second phase at Split Mountain. I enjoy it so much now that I actively sabotage newbies, Tonpa continued. A flashback showed the rock climber applicant from earlier, getting preyed on by the creatures that lurked around Trick Tower. I don't plan on becoming a hunter. I've already had enough fun this year. I usually bow out at this point, the rookie crusher said brazenly. Magna rolled her eyes and huffed. I like ruining people's hopes and watching the stupid look that gets on their faces, but nothing so underhanded. I own it, it's the best when they realize there's not shit they can do to stop you because you're stronger. She admitted proudly. True. A victory tastes much better when the opponent knows their enemy but they're so utterly outmatched. It serves them absolutely no purpose, Compress added, tilting his head to the side. You bastard. Leorio shouted, rearing back a fist. Stop it, Leorio. Kurapika said, putting a hand on his shoulder. But Leorio protested, angrily turning to Kurapika, who closed his eyes and shook his head. They just want us to fight amongst ourselves and waste time, Kurapika told him, turning to look back over at the other side. The other prisoners, yet to be revealed, stood back lurking in the shadows, while Bendot leaned against the wall, watching them with amusement. As disadvantageous and annoying it is, they need Tonpa. The game is majority rule, and they won't be able to reach the base of the tower without the odd number, Tokiyami said. Kurapika's right. They're already wasting too much time, what Tonpa did is already done. They just have to move past it and win the next 3, Momo sighed, slipping her eyes shut. But if their goal is to buy time, Kahlua spoke up, as the others turned to him. Then the old man made the correct choice, Kahlua said, gazing forward over at the prisoners' side. Huh? Leorio and Tonpa both grunted out, confused. Bendot watched them, a light relaxed look on his face. That bald guy's probably a former soldier or mercenary, Kahlua said. Had you fought him, he would have started by crushing your throat, so you couldn't say, I give up, Kahlua said, a faint impressed look on his face. Then he would have tortured you without killing you for the rest of the remaining time. Shinso felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Brutal, the purple-haired teen could only think of. Whether he speaks from experience or his own thought process, either one is certainly frightening to think of, Nedzu said slightly under his breath, his eyes reading Killua's blasé look. Super cool. Toga Stage whispered, a lazy smile stretching across her face, fangs glimmering. Tonpa's head ticked back to Leorio, face turned blue at Killua's words. That was one of the possibilities I took into consideration, he said weakly. Leorio looked at him with an unimpressed expression. You don't look so good, he said flatly. My plan was disrupted. I was going to take my time toying with him, Bendot said pensively. Footsteps rang out, as another robed prisoner stepped forward, walking past Bendot. Don't worry. Everything will be fine, they said with a calm chill. Koda swallowed dryly, his eyes darting back and forth from Bendot to the disguised prisoner. The nerves in his gut balled together tightly, forming a stone. Please don't be a killer, please don't be a killer, the mild-mannered boy thought. The cuffs on their hands fell to pieces, clunking on the floor heavily. Without much ceremony, they took off their robe, revealing a thin, pale man, shoulder-length hair that swept over his face, eyes low. The screen read, Sedicon 149YEAR sentence, serial bombings. If we defeat 2 of the remaining 4, then we win, Sedicon said coolly. Regardless, we need to win 3 rounds in advance, Kurapika voiced as they all surveyed the prisoner. Who's going next? Kahlua said. A bomber? Ojiro said, taken back. Doesn't seem like much of a fighter, but it wouldn't be wise to underestimate someone convicted for bombings, powerloader said seriously. Me? I'll go. Gon exclaimed with a bright smile, his hand raised in the air. The other four stared at him openly, silent. Are you sure? Leorio said doubtfully, hands on his hips. Uh-huh. Gon loudly agreed. Kahlua turned his head back to look at the prisoner crossing the bridge to stand at the platform. The next guy doesn't look too strong, Kahlua noted. But don't let your guard down. He's still a criminal, Leorio warned him quietly. Gon. Half of the students said in alarm for the young boy. The examiner allowed them to fight in any way they choose. I have a feeling this guy has a couple of nasty tricks, Recovery Girl said dubiously eyeing the smiling prisoner. Last match was such a bore. Maybe one of them will bleed this time, Toga whined slightly. For sure. Doesn't seem like it, Twice said to her, nodding his head. Gon removed his backpack, his fishing pole sticking out tall behind, and placed it on the ground. Uh-huh. I know, the young boy said, before walking forward to cross the bridge. Tonpa's actions have placed Gon and his friends at a disadvantage. The scoreboard for the group was at 0, as they all watched Gon. On the prisoners' side, Bendot remained as solid and still as a statue, the faint occasional smirk on his face an indicator that he was listening in. The remaining prisoners lingered in the shadows, unmoving. The students' eyes nervously lingered on the empty scoreboard. This hasn't started off too well, but they're not so behind to let themselves get discouraged, All Might reasoned. Gon needs to be extra cautious, there's no reason to entertain the idea that these prisoners will be merciful if they get the chance to kill, Todoroki said. What is their next opponent, Sedakan, planning to do in this match? The two, Gon and Sedakan, stood several feet away, both on the platform. Gon's smile was gone, replaced with a firm look as he stared at Sedakan, who sported a lazy grin, eyes sharp. At the start of the Hunter exam's third phase, there were 40 applicants. After one elimination, 39 remain. Gon and Sedakan stood silently observing each other, planning their first move. Oh man, Kirishima said in a dismayed tone, as the screen turned dark. The students began to grumble slightly, their spirits downed. Talk about unlucky, Zero groaned, feeling bad for the trio. As if it wasn't hard enough, of course Tonpa had to be there as well, Jiru added. It wasn't as bad as it could have been, Suyu said pensively. How much worse could it get? Ojiro asked skeptically. Well, they could have ended up with Hisoka as their fifth partner, she said, blunt. The class shivered at the thought of the group being trapped in with the murderous magician. In a way, it wasn't all that bad as well that Tonpa went against the prisoner, Todoroki said, much to the confusion of others. Huh? Question mark. Dude, he totally made them lose. Kaminari protested. If what Kahlua said was true, if any of them besides Tonpa decided to go first and try to fight the prisoner, one would be dead and the rest disqualified, Todoroki told him monotonously. They went quiet, silently realizing Todoroki's point. I guess it was good the bastards that much of a coward, Bakugo said, his face still tight and angry. All Might, the former #1 hero of Japan, sat leaning forward in his seat, his elbows resting on his knees with his hands clasped in front of him. Worried, big guy? He looked up at Present Mike staring him down. Ah, yes, just a bit. Young Gon and the rest are stuck in a real situation. This wasn't like the first two phases, it was dangerous, but things were going along so well for them. I'm concerned if they'll even make it alive, All Might said, the words bitter. The voice-quirked hero sighed at his words. The further they go, the harder it gets. It seems like the less chances they have as well to not simply just be disqualified instead of killed, he laughed humorlessly. All Might hummed in agreement, his eyes still focused downwards. Don't give up on them just yet. I don't think that group will go down without a fight, Present Mike continued, his voice strong and believing. All Might looked at him with slight surprise and wonder at how assured he seemed. Present Mike laughed and threw an arm over his shoulder. Hey, what's that thing you're always telling the kids? Plus ultra, am I right? He laughed brightly. All Might shook his head before chuckling. The light chatter and debate continued amongst the hero students and teachers alike, before the next episode began. Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.